walk away from it. So I started praying and said, God, if you want me out of here, you got to get me out. I'm under a contract. If I leave, I go to prison. So you got to get me out. 3 days later, my commanding officer came down to us and said, we have too many security police. They said, we need somebody to either switch fields to be a security specialist, or you can take an honorable discharge, full GI benefits, and we'll cut you loose. And I said, that's me. Okay? So I went home, and my dad was a police officer, and I was going to be a police officer. And I went home to tell my parents, bless God, I got out of the Air Force to go preach. My dad cried, my mom laughed. And my dad said, well, if you're going to do that, we'll do it right. Because, you know, my dad was a police officer. We had to go to the first social church in town. And he said, we'll put you through the cemetery down there in Dallas. And after you get out of that, then you'll be able to go preach because you'll know how to preach. And I said, I don't have time for that. I got to go preach. I said, he said, well, nobody's going to let you preach in their churches if you don't go to seminary. And I said, I'm not looking to go to their churches. I'm going to be on the streets. He said, well, you can't make a living doing that. I said, I'm not trying to make a living. I just got to preach. Well, I know what he was thinking because I've got teenagers now, and I'm thinking, when are they going to leave? But I started out preaching, and within about a year after that, I was married. We had our first child on the way, and during that time, we had a situation where I was introduced to the Word of Faith message. Had never heard of it before that, hadn't heard anything like that. My pastor at that time gave me my first E.W. Kenyon book and my first Kenneth Copeland tape, and I thought, man, this is, where has this been all my life? Right. So I started studying, digging in, and then my first daughter was born. When she was born with what's called a hemangioma tumor. A hemangioma tumor is a tumor made of blood vessels in a lump. It was about the size of my fist. And it was in a very unusual place. Matter of fact, she's the only child that's ever been born with it there. Still the only child. She's in the 1978 AMA Medical Journal. And it was in her tongue. When she was born, there was no, they did sonograms, they did the whole thing, ultrasounds, the whole bit. It was not there until she was born. When she was born, this thing as big as my fist was hanging out of her mouth. Now, she was our first child, and that's, first child, when you're young, it's hard enough just being there. But whenever something's wrong, it makes it that much harder. And so we'd already been learning about faith, studying faith, trying to find out how to work faith, and I knew healing was true. I just didn't know how to get a hold of it. Sure couldn't make it show up when I needed it to. So we started studying. Of course, that spurred us on. The doctors told us she would die very quickly. Matter of fact, they didn't even think she'd get out of the hospital. She was in Galveston, John Seeley Hospital for 6 months. Ran up a $186,000 doctor bill. You remember, I just quit the Air Force, had no insurance. Had nothing. But the doctors came down and said, we'll take care of the doctor bill if you'll let us put her in the medical journal. Well, we let them do that. Took care of that bill. We got her home. The doctor said, if you ever live more than 5 minutes away from a hospital, if she cuts her tongue, she will bleed to death. There were many times we would wake up in the morning, and by the time we woke up, you would walk into her room, and her room looked like someone had slaughtered a cow. And somehow she would have cut her tongue on something. Things you would be surprised. Blood would be everywhere. We'd panic, grab her up, put her in the car, put a rag on her tongue, take off to the hospital, and start praying in tongues. That's all we knew to do. By the time we got to the hospital, every time, the doctor would look for it, and all he'd find is a scar that he said looked about 2 weeks old. Every time. The tongue was getting smaller, the tumor in the tongue was getting smaller. They said if she ever grew teeth, she would bite into it, and it would kill her. She grew teeth. They said that she'd never be able to eat normal food. She could eat hamburgers. That's pretty normal. One thing led to another. We were making advances. I got a hold of Pat Robertson on 700 Club one time and said she had a tracheotomy in her throat to breathe because her tongue was too large. It would cover up her passage. And I said, I got a hold of them, and I said, I'm fixing to pull this tracheotomy out of my daughter's throat, and I need to pray with Pat Robertson. Well, that's a good way to get a hold of Pat Robertson. They put him on the phone. Okay? And he was on the other end of the phone. I said, I'm fixing to pull this out. She's either going to breathe or she's going to die. One of the two. And he said, are you sure about this, brother? And I said, no, we're going to do it. So he started praying. I started praying. I pulled the thing out. About 30 seconds, she gasped, started turning blue. It gave me ample time to change my mind if I was so inclined. And I stood my ground. And I said, it's this way or no way. This stuff is either true or it's not. After about 30 seconds, all of a sudden, kind of like a Book of Acts thing, all of a sudden, she started breathing. We never put the trach back in. The hole sealed up. She could breathe fine from then on. We had miracle after miracle, making solid advances constantly. Then, in the middle of all that, I backslid. I'm just trying to be honest with you, okay? I'm surely not here trying to tell you I'm somebody or make you think I'm somebody, okay? Because basically I'm just like you, and we're all just scum if you take Jesus out of us. That is it, okay? So don't sit there and look holy. You're scum too, okay? Is this a great job or what? You get to call people scum and they like it. You know what I mean, though. But I backslid. I made a vow to God on January 1st, 1981. And I said, God, I will preach this gospel from coast to coast, East Coast to West Coast, Canada to Mexico, and around the world if need be. Within 30 days, I was backslid. And just like it says, a dog returning to his own vomit, I was back in the very same things I had been in before. Now, I will tell you right up, I've never done drugs, never smoked cigarettes, never tasted alcohol. That was a vow I made to God when I was 9 years old. I've never broken it. Now, that doesn't mean anything other than the fact that God honors vows that you keep. Okay? So if you've done any of those things, don't think God can't use you, because he will. Because I didn't tell you what I did do. I'm not going to either. Okay? It's none of your business, okay? It's God's business and my business. And he doesn't bring it up. I don't bring it up. You know, anytime somebody does, I know who it is speaking. Okay? And I'll just tell you, February 13th, 1981, my daughter died. Double pneumonia. It had killed several football players in the same area. Hit her overnight. We called the doctor. He said, keep her ice down and keep her cool, bring her in the morning. Well, in the morning, she was dead. We found out later he just didn't want to get out of bed. I'm not against doctors, but I know there's a better doctor. I know there's somebody I can count on that still does house calls, still shows up, and doesn't have to worry about being put off. Then we buried her the next day, which was Saturday, February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. It's hard enough losing her on Friday the 13th, but burying her on Valentine's Day makes it that much worse. We stood there at the casket, at the graveside, little 3-foot white casket. It's a beautiful little casket, unless it's your daughter laying there. And I stood there and I vowed to God. Well, I want to back up a little bit because I need to tell you the whole story. I try to be nice as much as I can, but I need to tell you the whole story. A couple other things happened before then. Before she passed away, and if you've never had a child with a physical problem, you have no idea what I'm talking about. You may think you do, but you don't. But if you've had one, you know exactly what I'm talking about.